and welcome to KnightHunter Books. Today it's just me and I'm going to do something a little bit different, which is actually, well, I've had a bit of a realisation recently. I've been tracking my reading for a really long time, since I was 12, so I have every book I've read, all their ratings, all that kind of information just there, available. And I've realised that I don't really use it. I mean, I like to look at it, it's interesting, but I haven't really done statistics, like actually pulled it all together and thought about what I should actually be changing with my reading. Which I did a couple of weeks ago, and there's a whole load of things which I'd never quite realised or kind of thought about, but not actually seen the evidence of, which are really clear. So I thought I'd just talk you through some of them today. If any of you do have this information, I'd definitely recommend doing it. I mean, even Goodreads will give you quite a lot of it. This is kind of a reading resolutions video of sorts, so you'll get to see next year if I actually manage to stick to any of these. The first thing I actually looked at was authors, so I've got a list of all the authors I've ever read with how many books I've read of theirs, and I've realised that I've read nearly 300 authors, over 200 of which I've only ever read one book. So I think I have something in my subconscious which is telling me that reading new things and exploring and trying out debut authors, new authors, is more valuable than going back to authors that I know I like, which doesn't really make sense, because I'm sure that lots of those 200 authors I've read books by and I've actually really enjoyed, and then I've never allowed myself the time to actually go back and read something where I've actually got a really good chance of liking it. And I'm not a fast reader, so each of these books where I'm trying it out has probably taken 10 hours of my life to actually realise that they're not my thing, when I have a whole list of authors which I know are my thing. You might be able to tell I'm a little frustrated with myself. Also, of all those authors, those 300, there's only actually 8 where I've read more than 5 books. So I think I'd actually like to try and get a few more authors where I'm actually well read on them, where I actually feel like I've read most of their works and I could actually talk about them and say which ones are my favourite. The other thing I did was actually take all of the books, this was just looking since 2012, which is when I joined Goodreads and started watching YouTube, and when I started picking the books I read more carefully. I went through all those books and I kind of gave them a broad genre, and then actually worked out what the average rating was for each of those genres. I've split YA out, but this was very interesting. Turns out that I actually really like speculative fiction. I think I knew this, but actually my ratings for speculative fiction are a lot higher than for any other genre, and I consider myself to kind of be split between literary fiction and speculative fiction, whereas actually I think I'm just punishing myself with the literary stuff. So overall, looking at all the books since 2012, my average rating is about 3.5. There's a kind of few genres which I could kind of group together that are literary fiction really, but either dramas or historical fiction or what I call kind of cultural fiction, since anything that's kind of literary translated works. And the ratings are actually quite low on these, about 3.3 on average. And I don't think it's necessarily because I don't like those kinds of books. I think on reflection it might be that I'm just less fussy, so I'm more likely to pick up a book just because it's set somewhere I don't know much about, or about a period of history I don't know much about, without actually waiting for a personal recommendation or seeing that it's got a lot of hype or some really good reviews. Whereas I think for speculative fiction I'm much stricter with myself. Like, there's so many books that are like science fiction and fantasy where I've got personal recommendations, they've won awards, I've heard so many good things about them, but I still haven't got round to them. And I don't know what it is I'm actually waiting for there. Classics in particular, I've split this into classics and modern classics. Classics I only give an average of 2.9, which is, that's a bit low considering I'm not reading books that no one's heard about. These are books which I've heard really good things about. I think it just shows that I just don't get along with them. Modern classics I tend to do better with. This does include some kind of dystopian novels, things like 1984, which I really liked. So I think potentially I'm okay with classics, but only when they're speculative. Crimes and thrillers had a really low average rating as well, but that's not overly surprising, I don't read much of those at all. Horror had a really high rating, but I haven't read very many of those books. But I think that just means I need to keep doing what I'm doing with horror, which is reading the ones that I think really appeal to me. Dystopian has my highest average rating, along with science fiction and kind of surreal genre-bending books. So I think I definitely need to try and read more of those genres. YA tends to have slightly lower ratings, although for the kind of YA drama genre, YA does better, but I think that's just because there's so many John Green books in there and I'm very much sticking to the same authors. Now, I don't work in the book industry. I did used to work in a bookshop, which is I think maybe what's in the back of my head telling me to read as widely as possible. Really, I read for fun. I should be reading for fun, for improving myself, and I don't feel like that's what I have been doing. I think I've been still focusing on trying to read as broadly as possible, and I think I'd actually find it more rewarding to actually read a bit deeper, actually get to a point where I feel like I can speak about a genre with actually feeling like I know a bit about its history, I've seen how it's grown, I know what the new trends are. I'm kind of disappointed it's taken me this long to actually look at the data properly, so definitely feel like I've got to do something about it now. So next year, hopefully, you will see me reading more of genres that I like, so more science fiction and fantasy or dystopian stories, allowing myself to read books from authors where I've already enjoyed their books. In particular, I think this will be for, translated works and more on the literary side, because I know there's authors I've really enjoyed. I'd be really interested to hear if any of you have kind of a similar record, if you've ever actually looked at it and seen what it shows, or if you've ever had a kind of point like this where you've actually realised that you're not reading in the right way for what you're trying to get out of it. Let me know your thoughts below. Love to have a conversation about this kind of stuff. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon.